The lens that we try to see storytelling through is to check as many of the boxes that I mentioned as possible, but not necessarily all. And those boxes include, is the story visual? Is it something that we can tell in a visual way that can help engage people and grab their attention? And is it timely? Is there a reason that people should engage with this content right now, particularly journalists? Or is the urgency? And is our university leading the way? We see many studies that come through where we're involved, but not necessarily one of the leading authors, and that may be more difficult to tell that story. We want to legitimately claim that we're part of the story, not just one of many. As well as, is it intriguing to people who don't already have an affinity to the university? We don't just want to preach to the choir. We want people with no relationship to the University of Florida to also be interested in this content because it impacts their everyday life. And also, we would like it to be useful. There should be some reader utility in everything that we're publishing, even if it's just, wow, that's really interesting, I didn't know that. And then finally, if a researcher is active on social media themselves, then that gives them a little bit of edge in my book because we know they're going to share the content with their network and it will help us reach people that we wouldn't reach without it.
But is it a struggle thinking as a journalist and working with researchers that are sort of like very into their own little world?
It can be, and when I was earlier in my career, I would often ask researchers, why does this matter? Why is it important? Which is an important question, but sometimes they can take that very personally because they're so absorbed in the work that it's very obvious to them why it matters, but it's not always obvious to people outside the field. So I think once we develop the trust with the researcher, we can ask that question, and sometimes I ask it more in a way of, for people who don't understand how important this is, how do you tell them why this matters so that they understand we know it's important, but can they help us convey it? And sometimes they'll say, well, there was a hole in the literature, and we have to help them go deeper than that.
Is that hard to get that kind of trust?
I think it's about spending the time so that they can see the intentions are good and that they can see that we've done our homework. When they know that I've read the study or I've done some research on their background, they understand that we are not just there to get a quick soundbite and go, because many of them have had that experience where they've done an interview with a journalist who wasn't very prepared or didn't make an effort to understand the content, and sometimes they're very unhappy with the result.
But back to the four sort of tips. You say that not all of them have to be in place, but are there some that have to be in place?
If it's going to be a feature in our magazine, it has to be visual. There has to be a way, even if we use an illustration, there has to be a way for us to convey that content in an engaging way visually, or it doesn't belong there. Same for Instagram content. If we don't have great visuals, then it may not be the place for it.
But does that also mean that sort of the visual could be almost the whole content and just a line? Or?
Absolutely. There are so many stories that we can just tell with a photo and a deep caption that don't really need a narrative.
But do researchers like that when they see that, okay, that what we got out of this was two nice pictures and a line?
Sometimes they don't like that idea at the beginning because I think many of them are they come in with the expectation of a press release. And sometimes they'll even ask for a press release. But when they see how shareable the content is when it's packaged in an engaging way, I think they warm to that idea because they wind up getting the attention that they were seeking, just not in the way they expected.